Hey everyone, it's Motzie. We are now entering Act 2, Part 2, which contains my favorite arc in the entire series, the Doll Arc, or the Puppet Master Arc. Please enjoy this recap. We've already gotten some great feedback about how a lot of people forgot the first act, which is so fair, it's been a while. So we hope you continue enjoying the story so far. In episode 21, Manika, or Doll, Evelyn shares her research concerning the Elders and the story of Hyde, a town in northeastern Ontario with a population of 500 that was almost entirely wiped out in one night in the 1940s from a fire. Only one survivor was present during the event, Elaine O'Donnell, who was 14 at the time, and she claimed she saw the dead disguised as the living, and puppets made of human flesh. An old recording of Elaine's interview with a journalist is heard, where she describes Hyde right before the Second World War, where she and her best friend Laurie meet and befriend a puppet master, who repaired children's dolls and performed puppet shows in the square. The puppet master was harangued by the local priest, Father Mallory, but one discussion with him at their workshop, and he seemed appeased. Laurie and Elaine later sneak into the puppet master's home and find many handmade dolls and puppets, and in their workshop, anatomical references, explained by the puppet master's work as a doctor in the city. They try to enter the locked basement with a lock shaped like a face, and only Laurie is able to see its beautiful eyes. Before sneaking away, they find Father Mallory in the puppet master's front den, reading serenely. Some years pass, and many of Hyde's young men are sent to war, and Laurie and Elaine express interest in becoming the puppet master's apprentice. At Christmas, the puppet master performs the Nutcracker, bringing joy to the somber town and winning their love. At this point in the story, Elaine in the recording breaks down sobbing. In episode 22, Digmaan, or War, Part 1, Laura calls CJ and invites her on a lunch date, for more answers, but also to spend time with her. Meanwhile, Donner visits Vanessa for further answers, and she seems disturbed when he brings up the puppet master. She summons her husband, the red-faced thing, and asks him what he remembers, and she speaks of a former elder, the kind and sweet Peter Ilyich, who was seemingly controlled by the puppet master to recruit or kill elders in a war against the benefactor. At lunch, CJ further explains how the benefactor and his allies sought ways to counter the puppet master, such as attempting to capture the Wahila. She describes a secret weapon they eventually find to defeat the puppet master. In another recording, Elaine continues her explanation to the journalist about how the puppet master took her and Laurie in as apprentices until her parents forbade her after she began to neglect her duties, and how the townsfolk began to act stranger and stranger, including a boy they hated who, after harassing the two, disappeared briefly before returning much more well-mannered. Returning to Vanessa and Donner's discussion, Vanessa describes how, after they captured Peter, after his failed assassination attempt, they found his internal organs and bones replaced by wood and clockwork machinery. Peter begged for death, telling them of how he fed the puppet master information about the elders and their magic, and how the puppet master, a skilled doctor, somehow unlock the secret of bringing back the dead. In the final scene of Part 1, we hear construction workers talking about renovating an old house that's full of strange and frightening dolls. In Digmaan, War, Part 2, Elaine shares how the local baker, Mr. Jonathan, was wailing about how his wife, Lucille, disappeared before returning in the morning, though he was adamant it wasn't her. He insisted he'd shot the thing with his wife's face dead, but his wife then appeared, safe and unharmed, claiming he was having nightmares. He was sent to the puppet master, a doctor who specialized in neurosciences, and was fine not 2 days later. At age 14, Elaine was sent alone to pick up her brother's things in Toronto. Staying there for 3 days, on the third day, she picked up a newly sent letter, discovering that her brother had been killed in the war. When she returns home and delivers her parents the news, she finds them awe, barely affected by her brother's death. She runs away, intercepted by Laurie, who brings her to the puppet master's house. Laurie tells her that magic is real, and shows it by making Father Mallory stab himself in the thigh with a knife, seemingly feeling no pain. Laurie explains how she made the townsfolk better with the puppet master's teachings, better behaved, nigh immortal, and most importantly, under her control. She keeps the distressed Elaine resting in bed with anesthetics until their return. Elaine hears them talking about leaving Hyde and sneaks away, hiding herself in a basement closet and falling asleep there. When she awakens, everything around her is on fire, and she runs home, looking for her parents, the flaming roof collapsing on top of her. She would eventually be rescued and survive to adulthood in an asylum in Toronto. In present day, Vanessa talks about how Juliano had been called to war against Puppet Master, and their hundreds of corpse puppets, with Vanessa herself brought to an underground dome with an enormous clockwork machine, including a giant gilded head, revealed to have been Savard's machine. The benefactor wants her to make it work, so that they may have an edge against Puppet Master. But it needs a power source to do so, one they cannot seem to find. Searching for a way to defeat their enemy, Juliano sneaks into the Puppet Master's camp with his shadow-stepping ability and discovers Laurie, whom he kidnaps as ransom. In present day, Vanessa explains that Laurie had natural magic, like Mary and Ashvin, and proves dangerous when Juliana brings her to the underground dome. She almost kills Vanessa with her raw power, but Juliana slits her throat, and as she lies dying in a pool of her own blood, the machine comes to life, opening a rift to the other side of the veil, teeming with magic. When it begins to close as Laurie fades away, the benefactor desperately plunges his hand into it, a burst of power summoning hundreds of souls from the Puppet Master's corpse army into the rift, passing through the benefactor and giving him immense, unrivaled power, which he eventually becomes known for. puppet master surrenders when they realize that Lori is dead. And though the benefactor tries to bring them to his side, they instead choose to kill themselves, destroying their brain so that nobody might gain their knowledge. The final scene explains how Lori believed the world was her personal fairy tale, that she was a magical princess that deserved more than she had. She learns to harness her natural ability under the magician puppet master's tutelage, becoming their child and living her happily ever after, transforming the town to suit her whims. She then began to dream about another world full of magic, just over the rainbow, where she could have everlasting dreams. She makes preparations to take the town with her, including her most beloved Elaine. When she loses track of Elaine, during Hyde's fall, the town set fire by the benefactor. She asks the puppet master to give her a war. They oblige, allowing her to go to war with the benefactor and his people. Without Elaine, her world full of magic was for naught, and while she gave everyone else functional immortality, she did not have it herself, and was killed, choking on her own blood. Her puppet master parents following her in grief. In episode 23, Hudyat, or Signal, Mary calls her nanay to update her on their camping trip, when a fire alarm interrupts her call. Subsequent calls about Evelyn's research on Hyde, Laura pressing Mary on her relationship woes she avoids Donner after the camping trip, and Mary discussing the benefactor's power and connection to the other side of the veil, are also similarly interrupted. Her latest call is taken outside to avoid more fire alarm interruptions when she runs into a homeless man, who she remembers as Cornelius, having met him once before in passing. They notice other buildings having fire alarm issues as well, and he says he's grateful for them, having lost his son in a fire. In a new tape recording, Donner interviews a woman who survived a fire. She explains how she was opening a historical subscription box, which was carrying a random cursed focus, when strange sounds emanate from the hallway outside her apartment. She would have stayed inside had there not been a horrible smell, forcing her to leave in case of an emergency. And every time she runs away, she runs into inexplicable, endless hallways and corners. However, when she runs into dead ends, they burn away in front of her. She eventually finds herself on the floor of her apartment, fire alarms blaring, as an old man and young woman stand above her. In a separate recording, they're revealed to be Cornelius and Mary, with Mary identifying Cornelius as an elder, surprised to realize that he actually saved the woman by burning down the dead ends that she saw in the miasma. He leaves, but not before bidding her to investigate a gigantic underground storm drain in Toronto, called the Gargantua, and whatever is underneath it. In episode 24, Ilalim, or Underneath, Ashvin, in a call with Murphy, discovers a strange porcelain doll eye left among his shop's wares. In the next scene, Mary explains her experiences investigating the Gargantua, with Laura and Ashvin, interspersed with recordings from their trek, where they run into Abe, who's exploring haunted places for his ghost blog. Mary discovers an illusory wall using the eye and her anting-anting amulet. And when they go through, they find a gigantic pit, climbing down and walking through a tunnel until they discover a gigantic underground dome. They find the corpse of a teenage girl, and Mary and Ashvin try to see if they can help any spirits pass on, given how obviously violent her death was. Ashvin sees flashes of the spirit that used to be there, now long gone, revealing that an elder with a magical third red hand took her spirit from that place. It's clearly Laurie's corpse, and it's revealed that an attempt was made to replicate the time the benefactor gained such immense power during her death. But it never worked, because they weren't special enough. In another scene, DJ in the Dark listens to the story from a caller named Cal, who often finds himself on the long 45-minute subway ride home between downtown Toronto and Vaughan. He notices how at times, when some train cars turn so sharply, they seem to disappear. When they straighten out, he finds himself suddenly and inexplicably alone on the subway train. At one point, something outside the train seems to crawl along the windows. But then, he notices a homeless man who had been sleeping on some of the chairs stand up and fire engulf the outside of the train. The homeless man tells him not to worry, and next thing he knows, the other passengers return. He reveals to DJ that he tried not to take the train again, but he eventually does. And sometimes, the people still disappear. But he does his best to stay in the middle of the train, to avoid losing sight of others near him. He says he wanted to tell the story, in case one day he disappears himself, and nobody can find him. In the final scene, a shaken Abe builds up the courage to invite Mary to a brand new themed bar at Church in Wellesley for their Halloween night opening. And Mary says yes. In episode 25, Talikuran, or Turn Your Back, DJ in the Dark is interviewing an old man about his ghost husband, when the power suddenly goes out in their small recording studio at the top of an office building. The old man on the phone warns DJ of danger and says he'll get help, telling DJ not to look behind them. As DJ attempts to navigate to the elevator with their front camera, seeing nightmarish images at the edges of their vision and in the reflection, their call cuts off with the old man, and when it returns, the old man seems to give them conflicting instructions, until it's revealed someone else was imitating him to get DJ to slip up. Eventually, the real old man is able to get someone on the phone. It's Mary, instructing DJ on how to stay safe, and invoking one of her gods to protect them as a fellow Filipino. The old man with his ghost husband is revealed to have been the old man in Mary's prophetic dream in episode 8, Panaginip, who at this point in time she has recently saved, along with his ghost husband, who is the one warning him and telling him of how to save DJ's life. DJ returns to the room, eyes shut, as someone approaches, a gentle-voiced man, encouraging them to give up and die. He departs when someone else arrives. Mary, come to rescue DJ from the supernatural attack. the final scene, Donner and Mary see each other for the first time since the camping trip. And after an awkward reunion, Donner invites Mary to go out for Halloween, which Mary very reluctantly refuses, having promised to go with Abe. The two instead, optimistically, promise to meet up after Vanessa's planned meeting in November. In episode 26, Undas, All Saints' Day, Part 1. Mary listens to Donner's favorite music as she prepares for Halloween, asking Nanay to pay respects at that day for Undas, or All Saints' Day, a Filipino holiday to honor the dead. In the next scene, with the quiet background of a jazz club, a woman who sounds like Mary, but not quite like Mary, talks about how Mary herself has never stopped being Chay, the nickname she went by all her life in the Philippines. How Mary never really thought of herself as Mary. She then tells of Halloween night and sets the scene of a brand new nightclub built into an old house that once belonged to a doctor who was also a puppet master. Early on Halloween night, Mary meets Abe at the new club called the Dollhouse. Jumping forward, a tired Laura reports her experience at the end of Halloween night to an exhausted Donner, who has to contact families about identifying the remains of people who have died. Jumping back to earlier in Halloween night, Murphy, Ashvin, Laura, and Mary run into each other at the club, having a great time. Mary and Abe decide to go to the basement for a haunted tour, and end up with some other partygoers in a room full of dolls, a recording talking about their history, and the original owner of the house, a doctor named Drosselmeyer. Mary hears the recording mention Drosselmeyer. The name she remembers belonged to the puppet master. And when it mentions Laurie, she tries to get everyone to leave. Abe, out of curiosity, taps the glass case of the biggest, most lifelike Laurie doll, and it comes to life. The scene jumps forward, after the end of the night, to Donner interviewing Ashvin, who says he recognized the feeling of elder magic activating sometime in the night, and summoned a fire near the smoke alarms to trigger the sprinklers and get everyone out of the building, saving dozens of partygoers in the process. The scene then switches to the dreamlike other Mary, who speaks of a red hand that seemed to puppet doll Laurie to life. Returning to Halloween night, doll Laurie speaks of fulfilling his plan, the one who allowed her to come back to life, both of them wanting to kill the faceless one, or the benefactor. When Mary tries to reason with her, the basement floor suddenly falls away beneath them, plunging all the partygoers into impossible freefall. Mary uses her magic to rescue as many as she can, but one of the partygoers hits the ground before they can grab on, dying instantly. They find themselves outside, surrounded by woods, and Mary leads them on, as Laurie's disembodied voice counts 1. In episode 26, Undas, All Saints' Day, Part 2, The last episode in Act 2. Donner, after Halloween night, tries to get the silent Mary to talk to him, but she's completely unresponsive. Meanwhile, Evelyn, hard at work on her research, finds Elaine O'Donnell's old journal in the reference library, discovering a secret pocket within, housing torn pages that Elaine wanted to keep secret. She reads Elaine's account of the journalist, whom she calls Jay, who interviewed her about Hyde. She explains how the journalist grew up with two secret fathers, one of whom came from Hyde, and was fighting in the war when it fell. His father, or Da, had nightmares of its fall, dreaming of dead things chasing him and his hometown on fire. Jay had strangely vivid nightmares from his Da's stories as well. Jay would eventually go into journalism and cover Hyde, visiting the town and realizing it looked exactly like his nightmares, despite never having visited it before. Elaine is shocked by his knowledge, especially when he triggers an investigation that discovers human remains in the forests near Hyde. Jay promises Elaine he'll tell her everything he learns, and later returns to take Elaine to the doctor's house in the city. There, they find a half-finished automaton of a young man, and in the second basement, the Lori doll. Jay reveals to Elaine that she was the one behind Hyde's ruin, not just the puppet master. And they leave the dolls undisturbed. Elaine eventually accepts that, despite loving her Lori was not a good person, and she wonders about the mysterious automaton. In her last entry, Elaine talks about how Jay entrusted her with his life's work, which she hid away, hoping he'll one day return to take it back. Returning to Halloween night, Mary tries to guide the group of partygoers from the forest, where they're chased by dead things and surrounded by explosions, to a burning town where they're surrounded by unmoving dolls. Mary understands they're in Lori's realm, and Abe tries to keep her grounded and comfort her, denying her guilt for not keeping everyone safe. Another partygoer runs off, trying to help their friend. 3. Mary leads everyone to a door back to the basement, confronting Lori after she tricks another partygoer. 4. And telling her she'll help her find the benefactor. Lori agrees. Mary leads Lori to the benefactor by dreamwalking, walking through someone else's nightmare of their own death in the dark. When they return to reality, they're surrounded by nightmares, which Mary dispels. However, it doesn't dispel for Abe, still on the ground, unable to escape his own nightmare. Mary tries to snap him out of it, but he can't, and he dies in her arms, terrified of the dark. 5. Mary breaks down. Lori wakes, in a boat on a river, with Mary sitting across from her. She forces Lori to free the souls she trapped, intending to resurrect them as dolls. Lori realizes Mary has been to her place beyond the rainbow, which is the same as Mary's place beyond the river, on the other side of the veil. She has, in fact, visited this place many, many times. Lori tries to make Mary bring her there, but her magic no longer works. They're in Mary's place now. Mary reprimands Lori for being a selfish child, then mocks her with the knowledge that her precious Elaine didn't die, but she will never see her again. In the strange, dreamlike jazz club, other Mary wonders if you believe Mary, Chai, did the right thing with how she dealt with Lori. She wonders if you think Chai isn't petty or cruel, or that she wouldn't have done the worst possible thing to someone because she was in pain. She then tells a story of a little girl whose parents loved her. Her father taught native kids in the mountains and worked with farmers for years, until one day, the little girl had a nightmare. When they came to the mountains, her father had been gone for a week. His eyes, hands, head, and the rest of him found in parts. Her mother used her magic to take the eyes from those responsible, members of the armed forces of the Philippines, who had marked him a communist rebel. She then took their heads and hung their bodies from trees as a warning reminiscent to how people believed Aswang would kill and drink the blood of their victims. This was Chai's nanay. Chai, or Mary, herself learned from her. Other Mary then poses the question, what monsters do you think might be made from good people in pain? At the end of Halloween night, Donna arrives in time to meet a lost Mary in front of the dollhouse, wrapping her in his coat as she sobs her heart out, unable to save the people that she had tried so hard to save.
You're listening to Hainai by Motzie Dapul.